Give your best manager a coin, and if they flip it themselves, they'll bet more on heads than if someone else flips it for them. Same coin, same 50-50 odds, but doing it themselves makes the outcome feel less random. That's not a quirk of personality. It's a documented bias called the illusion of control, and it is quietly inflating confidence in offices everywhere. Right now, in ordinary planning meetings that never get questioned, in boardrooms, in performance reviews, in budget approvals that get rubber-stamped because the person signing off feels certain, and in one-on-ones where a confident tone gets mistaken for a correct forecast. Start with the cleanest version of it. Hand someone a lottery ticket they picked themselves, with numbers they chose, and later offer to buy it back. They'll demand a higher price than someone who was simply handed a random ticket, even though the odds are identical. Choosing the numbers didn't change the math. It changed the feeling. And feelings are what most people use to price risk, long before they consult any actual probability. Psychologist Ellen Langer named this effect and proved it experimentally in the 1970s. She didn't rely on surveys or hypothetical questions about what people thought they'd do. She built real situations involving dice, cards, and lottery tickets, put people inside them, and watched what they actually did with their own money and their own bets. In one line of experiments, she had people bet on a simple card game, competing against a confederate, posing as another player. Sometimes that confederate acted confident and poised, dressed sharply, moved smoothly. Other times the exact same person acted awkward and nervous, fumbling the cards, seeming unsure of themselves, dressed sloppily. Nothing about the actual odds changed between the two versions. The cards were shuffled and random either way, but participants consistently bet more money and played more aggressively when their opponent seemed nervous and inexperienced. They acted as if a fumbling opponent made the outcome more controllable, as if skill was somehow in play, when the entire contest was decided by a shuffled deck that neither player could influence. In another set of studies, Langer had people bet on dice. Some threw the dice themselves. Others watched someone else throw the identical dice, at the same table, under the same odds. People consistently wagered more when they got to throw the dice with their own hand than when a stranger threw for them. She also found that people bet more before an uncertain event resolves than after it has already happened, but the result simply hasn't been revealed to them yet, even though nothing has actually changed between those two moments. The physics of the dice never varies. But the feeling of agency, and the feeling of being mid-suspense rather than already decided, inflates the perceived odds of success. Langer ran variations on familiarity too. She found that the more a chance task resembled something people had practiced or grown used to, the more strongly they treated it like a skill. A task dressed up with the trappings of competence, a familiar setup, a rehearsed motion, active choice, a rival to size up, made people forget they were rolling dice against pure probability. Strip those trappings away and hand someone the plain, abstract odds instead, and the very same person suddenly reasons about it correctly. Later behavioral finance research on retail investors found echoes of the same pattern. People who felt personally in charge of picking their own trades reported more confidence in the outcome than the underlying odds ever justified, regardless of their actual track record. Across dozens of variations, a pattern emerged. Langer identified specific conditions that reliably trigger the illusion of control: choice, competition, familiarity with the task, active physical involvement, and a setup that superficially resembles a skill contest, even when it's governed entirely by chance. Stack enough of those conditions on top of a random event, and people will treat it like a game of poker instead of a coin flip. Take those conditions away, and the same person will judge the odds correctly, without hesitation. The bias isn't about intelligence. It shows up in smart, careful, quantitatively literate people just as strongly as anyone else. It's about how a situation is framed and experienced in the moment, not about how well someone can recite probability theory back afterward. Here's the mechanism underneath it. Humans are uncomfortable sitting with pure randomness. Uncertainty that nobody can influence is psychologically expensive to hold. So the mind looks for a lever, any lever, to grab onto. Choosing your own numbers, throwing your own dice, sizing up a nervous opponent, these all give the mind something to attach a story of skill to. even when no such skill exists or could exist. The story doesn't have to be true to be comforting. It just has to be available in the moment the decision gets made. And once a person has acted on that story and committed real money or real reputation to it, confirmation bias takes over from there. Wins get remembered and retold as proof of good judgment, and losses get explained away as bad luck, bad timing, or someone else's fault, never as evidence that the judgment itself was irrelevant to the result all along. The bias is also self-reinforcing over a career. The more senior someone becomes, the more of their past outcomes get filed away as proof their instincts work, and the harder it becomes to even notice how many of those outcomes were decided by forces that had nothing to do with them. Here's my own read on why this survives so well inside companies specifically, beyond what Langer's lab work covers. Hierarchies actively reward people who sound certain, so the illusion of control stops being just a private, harmless bias and turns into a performance. A manager gets promoted for staging convincingly. None of this stays confined to lottery tickets, dice, or card games in a psychology lab. It runs the exact same routine at the leadership level, just with bigger budgets, longer timelines, and much better job titles attached to it. Take hiring, a decision nearly every manager makes repeatedly. Plenty of managers trust their own gut feel about a candidate over a structured scorecard, even when the organization already has data showing structured interviews predict on-the-job performance more reliably than unstructured impressions. The manager remembers the firm handshake, the eye contact, a sharp answer to one clever question, and walks away feeling like they can just tell who'll succeed. But feeling like you can tell is exactly the sensation Langer documented at the card table, the same sensation people got from choosing their own lottery numbers instead of accepting a random one. The interview felt like a skill-based contest the manager happened to be personally good at. In reality, unstructured impressions are noisy, inconsistent, and swayed by irrelevant factors like charm or shared background, even between two experienced interviewers judging the exact same candidate on the exact same day. The scorecard is the boring, unglamorous data model nobody feels attached to. The gut feel is the hand-picked lottery ticket. Guess which one gets trusted more in the debrief, and guess which one actually correlates better with who succeeds on the job a year later. Take oversight, which shows up as a management style rather than a single decision. Some managers insist on personally reviewing every decision that crosses their desk. Every vendor contract, every hiring call, every minor budget line, every small approval, convinced that their personal attention is what prevents failures downstream. Sometimes that attention genuinely catches a real problem worth catching, but often what's actually happening is simpler and less flattering. Most of those decisions were going to turn out fine regardless of who signed off, because they were low risk to begin with, and the manager's personal involvement quietly gets credit for outcomes. Their oversight never actually changed one bit. The manager rolled the dice themselves, so a fine outcome feels earned and validating. Meanwhile, the real cost of that oversight habit, the bottlenecks it creates, the slower decision cycles across the whole team, the people who quietly stop bringing forward good ideas because everything gets relitigated at the top anyway, rarely gets tallied against the ledger next to the wins. The illusion of control doesn't just inflate confidence in this case. It has a direct, measurable operating cost, paid out in organizational speed. But here's the part nobody expects. The trap isn't just about noisy inputs, like a bad hire or a slow approval. It also swallows outcomes that go well for reasons that have nothing to do with the person standing closest to them. Take credit for outcomes nobody in the room actually controlled. A leader takes over a division right as a market segment happens to turn upward for reasons that have nothing to do with anything that leader personally did. A competitor stumbles badly, and input cost drops industry-wide. Demand shifts because of forces well outside the company's walls entirely. The leader was simply in the room when the numbers improved, made a handful of ordinary calls during that window, and later tells the story as though their strategy specifically caused the upswing. The board hears the story and buys it. Eventually, the leader starts to believe their own version of events too. This is the exact same trap as the market timing example from earlier. Launch a product on a date you personally chose, watch it succeed for reasons that had nothing to do with that date, and credit your own timing instinct anyway because you were the one who picked it. Success that simply arrives during your watch is not proof that your watch caused it. A quieter version of the same trap shows up at review time. Managers routinely rate their own contribution to a team's good quarter higher than their own team rates them for that same quarter, because the manager was personally present for every meeting and every call, and presence gets mistaken for causation. Being in the room for a win and causing that win are two entirely different claims, and the illusion of control is exactly what blurs the line between them at self-assessment season. The sales forecast trap works the same way, and it's worth naming directly because it is so common it barely gets questioned anymore. A manager builds a forecast from gut instinct, years of experience, a feel for the pipeline, a hunch about which deals will actually close this quarter. A data model, built from real historical patterns across many past quarters, produces a different number for the exact same period. Even when the model's track record is objectively better over time, measured honestly across many cycles, the manager still trusts their own number more simply because it came from something that felt like skill and personal judgment rather than a cold spreadsheet. The forecast built by hand carries the same psychological premium as the self-picked lottery ticket. It shouldn't. The market doesn't know or care who built the forecast or how good it felt to build it. It only cares whether the number turned out to be right. The championed project trap is close behind, and it's especially expensive because it compounds over budget cycles. A project a manager personally pushed for, defended loudly in budget meetings, and stayed closely attached to gets extended and refunded for longer than a nearly identical project someone else on the team originally proposed. Even when both projects are producing genuinely similar results side by side, the champion assumes their personal oversight is what's keeping the project alive and improving its odds of eventual success. Often it's simply survivorship dressed up as stewardship after the fact. The project would likely have performed about the same either way, and the manager's personal investment in it just makes the truth harder to see clearly, and much harder to act on when the honest call would be to kill it. So what's the actual fix here? Since the honest answer clearly isn't stop trusting your instincts entirely, some instincts are genuinely earned, built from real years of pattern recognition inside a domain you actually understand deeply. The useful fix is much narrower than blanket self-doubt and far more practical. It's learning to separate decisions where your input measurably changes the outcome from decisions where it doesn't move the needle at all, and then refusing to pay a premium of confidence for that second category just because you happen to be the one who made the call. Here's a concrete way to actually run that test in practice. Before trusting your gut on any recurring decision, ask a specific question. If this exact decision were run 100 times with 100 different reasonable people sitting in your seat, would the outcome meaningfully change based on who was making the call? A surgeon's steady hand genuinely changes outcomes across 100 trials. That's a real earned skill differential, and trusting that instinct is justified by evidence. A manager picking a launch date inside a 2-week window that the broader market was always going to reward or punish for unrelated reasons is a completely different animal. The outcome would likely have looked roughly the same with almost any reasonable person in that seat making a defensible call on the same day. If the honest answer is, the outcome barely depends on me specifically, stop treating that decision like a skill contest you personally won, and stop letting a good result there quietly inflate your confidence for the next unrelated call you make. Apply that same test directly to the sales forecast. Ask, honestly and in writing, whether your gut has actually beaten the model over many quarters tracked consistently, not just remembered selectively from the handful of times it happened to be right. Apply it to the championed project next. Ask whether it's still earning its funding based on this quarter's real numbers, or whether it's being kept alive mainly because killing it now would mean admitting your original judgment call mattered less than you've been telling people it did. Apply it to hiring too. Run the structured scorecard first, let your gut react to the candidate only after, and track over the following year how often the two actually disagreed, and which one predicted the eventual hire's real performance more accurately. Apply it, finally, to your own performance review, and credit your team for exactly the share of the outcome the evidence supports, not the share that simply feels right because you were present for it. None of this means ignore your judgment entirely, or hand every decision to a spreadsheet out of pure caution. It means stop confusing personal engagement with actual influence over the result. Being personally involved in a decision does not automatically mean your involvement is what produced the outcome you're now taking credit for. The manager who can reliably tell the difference between the two makes faster, cheaper decisions on the calls that don't matter as much as they feel, delegates more of the low-leverage ones without anxiety, and saves their real confidence, their real attention, for the handful of decisions where their judgment genuinely moves the number. That's the entire edge worth chasing here. Not more control, better targeting of the control you actually have. This is not about becoming a colder, more robotic manager. It is about being honest with yourself regarding which of your calls actually bent the outcome, and which ones simply happened to go well while you were the person standing in the room. Follow for more theories that actually explain your workplace.